Welcome back, episode 16.
Yes.
We record 2 episodes at a time, so if you ever wonder why we're wearing the same clothes for 2 different things a week apart, it's not because we wear the same clothes every day.
We don't have the commitment to bring a pair of clothes, an extra pair of clothes to training.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right.
We're just normal people like you. This is a good lesson here, though. If you have something that you're working on, a project, find the easiest way to do it, the way that is easiest to stick to it. And that's why we record 2 podcasts a day. So we only have to meet once every 2 weeks for this. So that's a way we're managing to keep it going and keep it going strong.
That's an important business lesson.
Indeed.
You don't have to do things perfectly.
We should have talked about that with steadfastness.
Yeah, let's open up with that. Good idea.
Yes.
All right.
You get to see the wheels turning.
Yeah, and how much planning goes into each episode.
He said that, not me.
A lot of prayer goes into each episode.
That is true.
Thank you for listening. I'm Skip.
I'm Michael.
This is the Lord's Army Radio Dispatch, episode 16. We are continuing, and this will be, in theory, our final episode with this passage. Although, I mean, this is a passage I personally reference all the time. So I think it'll be not necessarily gone, but or I hope not. But as we were opening up, we were having a conversation with our YouTube channel folks about how you don't have to do things perfectly. Now, if you ever want examples of that, go to watch our YouTube channel. It's a perfect example of how not to do things perfectly, but to do things faithfully and steadfastly. It made me think of a business of so I've met with a lot of business owners that spend a lot of time creating perfect products that end up going out of business because they didn't put any thought into how to actually let people know that they have perfect products and to market themselves. They didn't put any thought into the business plan. They were maybe really, really great, I don't know, pie bakers, and they made the absolute best pie in the world. They didn't know how to manage a business. They didn't know how to. So that person should have been a pie chef, not a business owner.
Yeah, and knowing your place within a situation. But this really also with that is, or somebody did great and they had the initial energy, but after 6 months, they're nowhere to be found. This is a big thing about our lives in general. We start so many different things, especially nowadays when it's like a piece of cake to start something.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to stick to it. Really think about something before you start it. I'm probably a good case study for this. Excuse me, I'm sorry. There were a lot of things in my few years ago that I started and shelved, and I gave up. And about a year and a half ago or so, read a book and really generated a lot of ideas and really understood the importance of planning and generating ideas and making it fit for you. And like what we were talking about with the podcast, you need to make sure that you have a manageable schedule of what you're going to do so that it doesn't require too much that there's no way that it's feasible for you to continue it. Because with a project, it's going to get difficult. And so you need to make sure that you can set it up to where it's easy to manage.
Exactly. And breaking things down into steps and then just making sure that you do those steps is essential for success, really. I mean, that's part of what we were talking about last week with steadfastness. You can't just do something once or twice. You have to do something consistently. And I can say there are times, everyone, when you start a blog, if you ever have started a blog, those first couple of blogs are easy. And then it becomes like, well, what do I write? Social media for me has been the hardest thing. It's not the hardest, but it's been one of the harder things for Lord's Army. Is I don't want to only be posting about our podcast and about our blog. So how do I vary that up consistently 4 or 5, 6 times a week? But just having a plan of how to do that, breaking things down into steps, and then just making sure that you're ticking off that checklist.
Because everybody wants to be the end result.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be the successful whatever, whatever you're working on. If you're working on a book, you're a successful author. Everybody wants to finish and be at the pinnacle of whatever they're looking for, or a person who's able to completely not have a job and just blog. There are people out there that do that, but we a lot of times fail to plan like what Skip's talking about, the steps necessary. And this really goes to our passage about steadfastness in 2 Peter 1. Everybody wants to be that fully committed Christian that knows so much of the Bible, but so few want to take the steps necessary to do that or to accomplish that. There was an old preacher that was approached one time. He was renowned for his Bible knowledge. Everybody knew how much he knew about the Bible. And this lady had walked up to him and said, "I would give half my life to know the Bible as much as you." And he said that's exactly how much it took. So it's going to come at a cost, but if we break it into manageable steps and we plan, we'll be able to do it.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, this ministry has been, so Lord's Army, the idea for that started over 3 years ago. And so, I mean, think it officially launched December 4th, I think, of last year. And that's my son. That's it. Hello.
Somebody wants to talk to you at 8 in the morning?
Anybody mind if I take this? When it started, this sort of path and this idea has been fleshed out and polished for 3 years before launching. And so, think about that. Hey, think about the Apostle Paul's life too. The Apostle Paul, a lot of times we think Damascus Road, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's the Apostle Paul, which he was. But in training, in the beginning part, he spent, I think it was 3 years, wasn't it? That's 3 years in prayer and training before being the super knowledgeable, all of a sudden has all the answers, Apostle Paul. It's not an instant thing. You can't go from young Christian to mature. One of the reasons that one of the qualifications for an elder is they can't be a newcomer. You can't go from new to experienced instantly. You can go from a non-believer to a believer instantly. That's the work of the Holy Spirit upon your heart and so forth. But you can't go from novice to expert in anything instantly.
Yeah, I believe it's Malcolm Gladwell that has the 10,000 hour rule with being a professional in anything, which that is quite the daunting task. But how often do we commit these or apply these principles to professionalism to our knowledge of the scriptures or our commitment to Christ? And obviously that is a more worthwhile venture than anything we could undertake on this earth. So it's important that we are committed, but we should recognize that it's going to take work. And it just doesn't happen overnight. As Skip pointed out, thankfully, we can become a Christian very quickly. We can obey the gospel. We can be immersed in water very quickly. But living that life, that changed life, and becoming a mature Christian takes serious time and commitment.
All right. So as we dig in, we've talked about steadfastness. We've talked about godliness. Now we are getting into sort of the latter part of this, the last part of this section. Add to godliness brotherly kindness.
This is actually the word Philadelphia.
Hmm.
We know that's the city of brotherly love.
I really don't have, this one seems pretty straight. Of all the lists, this one seems the most straightforward. Treat others the way you'd want to be treated. Love them, sincerely love them. I will say one thing about this. One of the reasons why I appreciate not only where it is, not only that it's on this list, but also where it is on the list is. I think I've talked about the Benedict option, and Benedictine monks, and those things before. The idea of withdrawing from society or withdrawing, I get it. The idea of taking a Bible and some commentaries and going off in the middle of the desert and doing nothing but that, completely withdrawing from everyone and doing that. I get that temptation. I mean, like that's right up my alley, but it's not a good thing to do. It's good to have individual time in prayer and scripture, but one of the reasons we have that time is so that we live an active faith in the world, loving other people. You can't do that if you don't interact with other people. And so, introvert to introvert, if that's what you are out there, I get that temptation, but we should love others, and we have to love others, and we need to be active in the loving of others.
Yeah, and then this brings out um, a good point about monasticism and things like that. You shouldn't isolate yourselves from the world because you need to reach the world. We're supposed to be affecting the world, and we're supposed to be kind to our brothers or um, show brotherly affection, brotherly love. We can't do that if we don't have brothers, if we don't have people around. But there's a principle here. It's a fact. Um, John writes about it in 1 John 2. He says there in verse 9, I'm going to try and read it from afar. Whoever says he is in the light and hates his brother is still in darkness. Whoever loves his brother abides in the light, and in him there is no cause for stumbling. But whoever hates his brother is in the darkness and walks in the darkness and does not know where he is going, because the darkness has blinded his eyes. So you can say that you're in the light and you're a godly person and you're a Christian. You could say that to your blue in the face. But if you don't love your brother, you're in darkness.
That's the exact imagery here that Peter uses in verse 9, which I know we'll get to, but he says that if you lack these things, you're blind. And that's both apostles using the exact same imagery of if you lack this list, one of which is loving others, having a heart of love towards your brothers and sisters, then you're blind.
Yeah, for sure. And this, I think, would also be directed at a lot of our more conservative churches. I know that doctrinal purity is important. It really is. But just as important is how we treat others. I think of the connection between truth and love from Ephesians 4, where Paul says, but rather speak the truth in love. And here in 1 John, if you don't love your brother, you are in darkness. No matter what religious acts you do, no matter what religious group you are a part of, no matter how much you shout that you are a Christian, if you do not love your brother, you are in darkness. And so brotherly kindness here is something that brings a lot together. We're not going to be perfect in everything, but we should do our best to treat our fellow man with dignity and respect.
Spurgeon, Charles Spurgeon, talks a lot about love. I mean, he talks a lot about love because he's a sound preacher, so of course he talks a lot about love. But specifically, he talks about how you don't have to be smart to be a loving person. You don't have to be well educated. You don't have to be particularly gifted to be a loving person. It requires nothing special about you besides loving love itself. You don't have to go train to know how to love someone and how to care for someone. And it's particularly, I think, noticeable that it's in Ephesians where love is linked to doctrine, because it's the church of Ephesus in Revelation that will lose its lamp because it lost its first love. And I know there's some debate as to what the first love is, but I think it's pretty clearly Christ and the gospel and reaching the lost and that loving attitude. And it's sad that the Church of Ephesus, such a sound church, is a place where Christianity is illegal right now.
Yeah,
that lamp is gone.
Yeah, it is. Well, and it goes back to what you're talking about with Revelation there. Even in that address, he talks about how they hated the works of false teachers, and they were standing for the truth, but they were at risk for losing their lampstand because of the love that they had lost. It again reinforces the importance of it.
It's not either or. You got to be a church that's both. You have to have sound doctrine and love. Like having knowledge without love is half. It's not even half the equation. It's a small percentage of the equation. It really requires both. being completely loving without any sort of knowledge or doctrine or things taught is useless. It's unfruitful. It's not going to do anything. It's temporal. Um, but at the same time, not doing those things, uh, only preaching truth, but yet having a very hateful attitude towards those who are lost, you're also going to be unfruitful because you're not going to reach the lost if you've been preaching hatred towards them. That's one of my big issues with Christian movies. Honestly, one of my biggest, sort of grievances with Christian movies, and we go to most of them because we like going to movies, and that's about the only movie you can go to anymore that's not like R-rated. Is a Christian movie, so we go to most of them. But usually, the atheist character, the enemy, if you will, is so unbelievably unhuman and unrelatable and completely evil in every way. It's just not, it's always like,
Not realistic.
yeah, exactly. It's always that the church is this great, loving, wonderful place, and the atheist in the, that's the Christian character, and then the atheist character is like almost like a James Bond villain type. And it's just, that's not, I wish it was that way, but that's just an unrealistic picture.
Mm. Well, and I want to make a distinction here. As we're talking about this, we're talking about brotherly kindness and love as one and the same. And let's go ahead and make this distinction before we go too much further. We plan on covering love in the next few minutes as well. But Philadelphia, brotherly love, and that's what's the first one. And that's more of a friendship type love. Um, Especially in our day and time, we might call our male friends brothers, or you might call your female friends sisters, and that's an affectionate thing. And so that's what I think of when I see this. I think of the word camaraderie in the church. I think this is something that should be important. In the early church, they hung out consistently. They were with each other day by day. Many of the Christians lived together because they were displaced. And so the Christians cared deeply for one another. And a church should be a group of people that cares deeply for one another, that likes spending time together, that enjoys one another's company. Worship should be a wonderful experience every Sunday because we get to go meet with the church and worship God there. We get to do the most wonderful thing with some of the most wonderful people. And so that's a good thing. And it should be something that your church is committed to. And if it's not, bring it up or do your best to make your church feel more like a family. Invite people over. Just spend time. Go out to a ball game together. Go to the movies together. Enjoy time among other Christians.
Exactly. And like you said, from First John, that whole epistle, it really is, one of the ways that you can have assurance of your own salvation. And one of the key ones from there, like you quoted from First John, I think it was 1, but 2. Sorry, First John-ish, early First John.
Just sit down and read the whole book. It only takes about 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I get them so completed. But I mean, one of the clear signs from that is a love for the church and a love for your brothers and sisters in the church, and not a love that's not a love for the building. That's a love for the people in it. And so, yeah, exactly. That should be who you hang out with. You should want to hang out with other believers. Because if you don't like hanging out with other believers, I'm not sure you're going to enjoy heaven very much because
it's going to be a tough experience for you.
Exactly.
But that's important because it was important to the early church. Think about Jesus. He spent all of his earthly ministry with 12 guys, plus a few other followers. He was close with them. They ate together,
reclined on each other.
They reclined at table together. So it's important to share downtime together. So not just worship gatherings, but other kind of events and things going on.
Yeah, it's such it's a shame when the church only engages, only comes together to worship. In some sense, every time Christians get together, you're worshiping. But it's a shame when it's when like you meet for an hour a week and then that's it, and nobody really talks to each other. That's such a I don't know. You're just missing so much. You're missing so much of what the church really should be.
Yes, for sure. Exactly. And so we don't have too much time to talk about love, and perhaps maybe even we should just devote a whole podcast to love.
Yeah.
And that might be what we end up doing. But
So this will not be our last podcast on this topic because
yeah,
it's just too much.
yeah, and I guess love will really also segue well into his comments at the end of it. But as we finish brotherly kindness, this is more of what Skip talked about: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, treat people well, be kind to one another, have a smile. I'm actually reading a book right now called The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. I believe it's David Schwartz, Dr. Schwartz. I'll catch it that way. Anyways, his book and a part of that is positive thinking, obviously, and he talks about the power of smiling. He says, you know, if you're ever about to have confrontation, just smile, and the other person just can't be mad at you, or can't be outraged with you. He experienced that when someone rear-ended him, and the person came up to him smiling ear to ear, and he just couldn't believe it. His anger just dissipated so quickly. But you know, it's important to smile and to be positive toward one another.
Exactly, and it should match our heart. I mean, we should, if you have to do it, just to do it, do it. But it should be that our heart is always joyous and flowing with love for the other person. And so a smile should be natural. I mean, that should be the default Christian face, right? The default Christian face should be a smile. Because, I mean, ultimately, what can happen to us? I mean, that's you can't read like Fox's Book of Martyrs, where you have all these people being slaughtered for their faith and doing so, even being slaughtered joyously. They're even singing hymns as they're being murdered. So I mean, if you're having just like a bad Monday, like
that's not near as bad as being burned at the stake.
Exactly. All right. Well, for more resources, so we'll get more into this. I think we'll have to take one break um, for our next podcast, so that we can get right back into this. But for more information and resources, please check out lordsarmy.org. And if you want to see the video of us bumble through these things, you can check out our YouTube channel, which you can also access through lordsarmy.org. Thanks so much. I guess I should save this as well.
How do you